Hi there, how you doing? This is Nancy Cogar and this is Boomer Time. I am so glad you're here. And you know what? I wanted to check in with you this week. How are you doing? Maybe you've had some challenges this week. I know I've had a few. It's just normal, but that's part of the reason I created Boomer Time. I want you to have a place, to have community, have a place where you have resources, and a place where you can feel encouraged. Maybe you're a caregiver and you've just had some challenges this week. You're not alone. It's tough. So today we are going to talk about a tough issue, but it's important, and it is hoarding. I know you've seen those shows. They are hard to watch. I have a hard time with that too. The problem is, though, people can get themselves into very complicated and oftentimes dangerous situations when it comes to hoarding. And you know what? It is more common than you might think. So that's the reason we are talking about that today. It's hard to address, too, if you've got a family member that has signs and symptoms of hoarding. You have to be careful about how you approach it. So I'm going to offer some help today and some thoughts and some resources, and I hope you walk away with some things that can be helpful. Okay? Well, we're going to start first with a few news items in elder law news you can use, some headlines from the past week that I think are important to highlight. You may not see these things in other places, so I want you to see them here on Boomer Time. And remember, while you're at it, remember to go to my website, nancycogar.com. You will get all kinds of information, not too much, but all kinds of information, including my monthly newsletter, Elder Law News You Can Use. The first headline I'd like to share with you is looking at the typical Social Security check in America. There's a lot of talk about Social Security for a lot of reasons, especially during this election time. And if you receive Social Security, you know that it is not what you would consider retirement on its own. Well, the U.S. Census Bureau has looked at national middle-class income ranges between $49,000 and $147,000. That's a span that's heavily influenced by location and cost of living considerations. Did you know that the median household income is about $74,000 a year? So a 55-year-old making that amount today would plan to have a Social Security check at 62 of about $1,869 a month. That's just $22,428 a year. Presuming the retiree has no savings and would rely on Social Security alone. It's no surprise that that is dangerously close to the current poverty line incomes for one person. So coming up on Boomer Time, we are going to talk with some retirement experts, more specifically about how to retire without going broke. And I think that should be interesting for you. Looking forward to that. Well, it is open enrollment for Medicare. The annual Medicare open enrollment period officially opened this week. And if you haven't already looked into what you can do, there's a lot to learn. That open enrollment period rolls around every year, as you know, and you have the opportunity to change plans, no matter what your current plan is. And that lasts a little more than 2 months, and any changes would go into effect in January. So there's an estimated 67 million Americans over the age 65 who receive health care coverage through Medicare, all of whom are eligible to make changes during this enrollment period. But did you know in the years recent to us, researchers have found that few are actually making use of this period to consider options? In fact, in a recent survey, 69% of respondents didn't review their source of Medicare during the enrollment period. So, if you're wanting to do that, of course, this is the time to do it. And that annual enrollment period lasts through December 7th. I've got a fun story for you. There's a traveling challenge that involved a grandmother and grandson team. 93-year-old Joy Ryan and her grandson Brad just completed a road trip that took them through all 63 national parks. And did you know that makes Joy the oldest person on record to ever visit all those parks in an 8-year time period? I can imagine the great memories that they must have built together. Grandson Brad described the adventure as a great privilege. Their journey started back in October of 2015 when they visited the Great Smoky Mountains National Park right here in Tennessee, and just concluded when they made it all the way out into the South Pacific in the American Samoas. They decided to go on this trip after the death of Brad's father, who was Joy's only son. I think that's great. Well, finally, there's an election coming up, and there is assistance available when it comes to voting. Federal laws require that polling places be accessible to individuals with disabilities. And this includes providing accessible voting machines and ensuring that the physical location is accessible. Of course, states and local jurisdictions are responsible for implementing these requirements. There are several ways you can find information, and I'm going to put some of that on the website so that you can look at that. The Hamilton County Elections Commission here in this area has information on its website related to the candidates, so you can see that information. And there is more information about your polling place. You can call them to ask questions. The number is going to be on the website. And so if you're outside of Hamilton County, of course, you can contact your local elections commission, and they should have the same information available. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about hoarding. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about hoarding today, and even the word is tough. It's more of an issue, really, than you might think, too. It's not always just hoarding. There are lots of people that just accumulate too many things. And when you're older, that can create some special problems. 80% of older adults experience hoarding to the extent that they can't move about their house. 70% said they couldn't sit on their sofa because there was so much there. And then more can't access the kitchen to make food. So hoarding disorder can cause a variety of complications, including but not limited to, obviously, the increased risk of falls, injuries from being trapped or shifting or falling items. It can create family conflicts and lead to loneliness and social isolation. Conditions like that are, not often clean and can also be a health risk, a fire hazard. They can lead to legal issues, including evictions. Hoarding is one of those things that's extreme on the scale. Older community members who experience hoarding can face significant challenges. In addition to worsening just, a person's quality of life, hoarding can lead to, as I've said, isolation, loneliness, and housing problems. While about 2% of the general population struggles with accumulating just too many objects, hoarding impacts over 6% of people aged 65 and up. Aging exacerbates the dangers of hoarding. Challenges with vision, cognitive ability, and energy levels, as well as chronic health problems, can make hoarding more hazardous. Cluttered homes, like I mentioned, can put seniors at risk for falls. And we've talked about falls. That can be one thing that ends up causing someone to not be able to stay at home. Hoarding may also lead to an inability to use walkers or wheelchairs inside their residence. And senior renters have unfortunately been evicted for hoarding behaviors. And, in the most extreme examples, that can lead to homelessness or just unwanted transfers to long term care facilities. I have talked about isolation. Um, you know, People that have been reported as having problems with hoarding do report more loneliness. And the social stigma can make individuals reluctant to invite people into their homes and even accept help. So, when objects crowd a home, living conditions can become unusable and unsafe. And finding things in a cluttered environment can be difficult. This can create problems with, as something as simple as locating important documents or being able to find items necessary to apply for benefits and assistance. As I've said, about 2% of the general population struggles with accumulating too many items, and 6% of people over age 65 struggle with hoarding itself. The proportion of older Americans is expected to increase, as I've said before, from just 16% in 2019 to over 25% by 2060. So, with an aging population, you're going to see hoarding behavior that may become more prevalent. So, what is hoarding? An excess amassing of possessions can indicate what's known as hoarding behavior or hoarding disorder. HD is what mental health officials call it. And it can, as I've said, lead to a level of clutter that often makes it difficult for those who are affected by it to maintain their residences. This hasn't been a diagnosis or an official diagnosis for very long. It was about a decade ago that we saw the first case that was diagnosed. So, what do you look for when it comes to, concerns about hoarding? Well, the first symptoms of hoarding sometimes can appear even with teenagers or early adult years. You may get and save too many things, building up clutter in living spaces, or have difficulty getting rid of things. Then, the real danger comes as you grow older because you may continue getting things, holding on to things that have a special memory, or you may never use, or you don't have a place for, or you end up not having any more space for things. By middle age, the clutter can become so overwhelming and more severe and increasingly difficult to treat. Problems with hoarding gradually develop over time and tend to be a private behavior. You may avoid friends, family, repair workers even coming to your home. Often, major clutter has developed by the time it starts to reach the attention of others. So, what do you do? Symptoms may be, ongoing difficulty throwing out or parting with things regardless of their value. Maybe you've just accumulated things over time. Someone dies and you inherit the possessions of the family. Feeling a need to save these items or, being emotionally upset by getting rid of them. I've seen it where building up clutter can get to the point where you just can't use certain rooms in your house. I've had one client who had so many books on the floor, all over the house, just hundreds and hundreds of books, that he couldn't use furniture, couldn't walk around. He was in danger of falling down. It was all obstacles through the house. You may, just try to avoid or even delay decisions with that. But, it's like planning. You've got to address it one step at a time. You may see, disorganized piles and stacks of items like newspapers, magazines, clothing. I've got some of that in my house. Paperwork, books, old tax returns, bank statements, and even, as I've said, sentimental items. Those items can clutter walking spaces, like I said, and living areas. And, like I said, rooms can't be used for the intended purpose. Maybe you can't sit on the couch. Maybe you can't sleep in your bed. It becomes worse even when there's a buildup of food or trash, when it gets to unsanitary levels. Incontinence, sometimes they're bags and bags of soiled diapers and things, and that can be very unsanitary. There's distress and problems being able to function or keep it to yourself. And if you've got pets, that just adds to it. This is the kind of thing, if you're going to try to deal with it, it can easily lead to conflict, relationship issues, avoiding social activities, and even employment problems. With hoarding disorder, items are usually saved because you believe they're unique, that you might need them at some point in the future, right? You feel emotionally connected to those items. They remind you of happier times. Maybe someone passed away and you're just having a hard time letting things go from that person. That's normal. Or maybe they represent, beloved pets, people. You feel comforted when you're surrounded by those items. So I want to emphasize that hoarding disorder is different than collecting. People have collections. You can have collections of stamps, china, model cars, specific items. Those are organized and displayed, but they can be large, right? Also, they don't cause the kind of distress and problems that are part of the hoarding disorder. I've even seen instances where there's hoarding of animals, right? Where people have dozens or even hundreds of pets. I had one house that I went into. The woman had fallen and became injured. And did you know there were hundreds of cats in this house? One room just simply had kittens in it, which were being procreated through the house by all the cats. So, this is very complex. But you may see animals confined outside, and they're not cared for because there's so many of them. And as I said, the health and safety of the person and the animals is often at risk because of that unsanitary condition. Well, what can you do to help a loved one that's struggling with hoarding? I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that, both what you can do, treatment, and some resources. I'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Boomer Time. This is your host, Nancy Cogar, and we are talking about a difficult topic today, hoarding. What can you do? How can you spot the signs of it? What's the difference between collecting and outright hoarding? And now we're going to talk about what do you do to help a loved one if you suspect or know that they're struggling with hoarding. Well, first, know that the longer that you avoid the issue, the worse it's going to become. It's better to deal with it head on. So you want to be delicate with this because it is a disorder, and sometimes it is a part of a decline mentally, and sometimes it's part of an emotional issue. So it's not something that you can drastically intervene in that way. But at this point, you are going to want to sit down, especially with your older parent, and have just an honest conversation and a loving conversation about their home and its condition. You may need some professional help. As a matter of fact, I think you are going to need some professional help. I'm going to talk about some resources in just a minute, but this can be traumatizing. So, just to come in and start throwing things away and moving someone out of their house to an unfamiliar place, that is traumatic. And that's the worst case scenario. Say someone gets injured or can't live in a place anymore because of its condition. They end up being traumatized, really, and then they go to a new, unfamiliar place and can't go home. And it leaves a big mess there as far as what do you do to clean that up? Maybe it gets condemned. I've seen that too. So I would suggest setting some small goals if you can. Keep things moving and please leave shame out of the equation. Okay, let the senior have some control over the decluttering. Maybe they want to start in an area that's more comfortable for them. And be prepared for setbacks. You know, this is a disorder, as I've said. It can be a mental issue, as is depression, anxiety, OCD, and dementia. And hoarding can be tied to a lot of those things. So that's why I say you want to get some professional help in, these difficult circumstances. Wanted to talk about some do's and some don'ts, really, okay, as we deal with this. Absolutely don't remove things from their house without their consent. I know it may be tempting to get them out of the house and clean up your loved one's space, but I'm telling you, that could lead to severe emotional distress just at the idea of losing valuable or important items. Throwing things away or getting rid of them without permission may even make it worse. You don't want to expect the cleaning process or the healing process, as a matter of fact, to happen overnight. Chances are this didn't happen overnight either. And it can take a long time for someone experiencing this disorder to get to the point of having a house that's unsafe. So it may take a long time to change the environment and the behaviors that have caused it. At the same time, don't enable their behavior. You may not want to see your loved one experiencing distress by adding to their clutter, buying or giving them things on shopping trips can be problematic. Some people have hoarding disorder where they constantly order on Amazon or Home Shopping Network and they just have boxes everywhere. You don't want to start sending those things back either. You want to make that part of a strategy that has the support of a professional. So instead, try to provide support, spend some time with them. Don't necessarily focus on cleaning up after them, okay? I know that's tempting, but organizing the space of someone who's experiencing that hoarding disorder could keep them from addressing the deeper concerns that are leading to that behavior. If they choose to clean it up, you can help them do that, but don't do it for them. And obviously, a senior may want to change their ways, but may find themselves just unable or just paralyzed or fearful to do so. So, in those situations, it's better to enlist the help of a professional. You may also have to take some legal action. I mentioned those legal documents may be difficult to find. You may want to look for those. And if they don't have those, you may be faced with court action, as I've said. So, oftentimes treatment can involve behavioral therapy, counseling, support groups, and medication. And there is even virtual reality therapy. But unfortunately, people with hoarding disorder or HD and their loved ones may have trouble finding healthcare professionals that specialize in this particular disorder. For that reason, you may want to start with a geriatric care professional, and they can refer you to someone because this really, as I said, has not been around as long as you might think as a diagnosed disorder. So here are a few resources that I think might help provide support for the older people that hoard and their family members. I'm going to put these on the website too so that you can look for these and have some more time to download them, copy them, and think about what might be the best strategy for you. So there is an organization that's simply known as HELP, and they offer referrals for counseling and resources in older people and their families for those experiencing hoarding. And they can also connect you with legal services, mental health assistance, and support groups. So I'm going to put some information on the website about that. There's also the Area Agencies on Aging. We have one of those here in Hamilton County, and they offer local support and referrals and things for issues related to aging. I'll put a link on my website for that. And they're just, certain organizations that can help with cleanup. You can find cleaning companies, people that can haul off big items, storage and recycling services, and more. So you want to search for these items. I'll have some of them on my website. And of course, an elder law attorney like me can help with issues related to hoarding, long-term care planning, property disputes, evictions, all those types of things can be legal issues that come out of the result of just hoarding that's gotten out of control. So I want to offer some encouragement, because I know this is a tough topic. You may be a caregiver. Maybe you have a parent that's struggling with some hoarding and you just don't know what to do. You're not alone. As we say here on Boomer Time, this is a community where I want you to feel safe and have these resources, be able to talk about these things and share. I want to hear from you. So reach out. You can go to my website, nancycogar.com, and reach out. You can also subscribe to the elder law news you can use. So caregivers, I want to speak to you specifically because I think this issue often is something that is difficult to resolve, and caregivers will be in the front lines. Remember, as you deal with these things, that self-care is so, so important. If you burn out, you're not going to be good to anyone. So it's not being selfish, caring for yourself. And get some help. There's help out there. Okay? Thanks for watching. I'm Nancy Cogar, and this is Boomer Time. I'll see you next time.